Well, thank you, everyone. And thank you for showing up for what is probably a little bit of a daunting topic. So really appreciate you joining us here today. This is a very personal thing for both Kiran and I to talk about. And I think for both of us, it's probably the first time that we've ever talked about it publicly. But I think both of us have leaders learned so much about what we went through that we really felt it was almost our responsibility to start to share what we've learned. And the reality is 12 million Americans are living with cancer right now. So it means that not just Kiran and I up here on the stage, but probably every single one of you has either been touched yourself by cancer, or you have a friend or a family member or somebody you're working with that has cancer. So it is something that almost all of us have in common. But the reality is each person's story is very different, and what you learn from it is very different. So although Kiran and I both have gone through it, we have very different stories. And so we thought we would just share those with you, share with you what we've learned and how we're trying to take those learnings back into our everyday life, into our organizations. So that's what we're going to do. We're just going to share our stories. I was appointed as CEO at BBDO in September of 2017. Prior to that, I had been the president, and prior to that, I had been the managing director. I'm getting ready to go on my 14th year of being at BBDO. When I was named CEO, it was during a time of uncertainty in our industry, turmoil in our industry, and massive transition in our industry. Everything that we're all going through right now. It was also at the height of the Me Too challenge. But personally, I was extremely excited about the role, and I knew that I was up for the challenge. Unfortunately, shortly after, I was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. I was scared for myself, I was scared for my family, and I was scared for my agency. But as Jane Fonda always says, no pain, no gain. So as daunting as it was, I picked myself up and I thought to myself, instead of really focusing on why is this happening to me, what can I learn from this? And I was very fortunate to have incredible support at BBDO, but my time at Memorial Sloan Kettering literally changed me. And I don't know that I immediately thought to myself, why is this happening to me? And instead of focusing on that, what am I going to learn from it? But I know that the minute that I walked into Memorial Sloan Kettering and started watching the way they worked, that I did have so much to learn. And, it's interesting because our industry, we can allow ourselves to spin and we allow ourselves to get so worked up. And how many times have we heard people say, oh, just calm down, we're not curing cancer. Well, the truth is Memorial Sloan Kettering is actually curing cancer. So I thought, you know what, if there's something as big and as important as actually saving lives, there's probably something that we can learn from these people. So I'm just going to quickly take you through the 5 or 6 things that I learned and that I've tried to take back as a leader. And the first is that they're unapologetically always moving forward. They do not focus on yesterday. They do not sit around and say, hey, this medication worked 2 years ago. Let's just keep using it. They are constantly changing and constantly evolving, and they're unapologetic about it. I was on apparently what was one of the most breakthrough chemo pills post all the stuff that I went through. And all of a sudden, one day, I get a call from my doctor, and she says, you need to get over here immediately. We have a brand new medicine that's been approved, and we need to get you on it. And I was like, well, what about the breakthrough medicine that I was just on? She's like, no, we're moving on. And I thought to myself, what if we were that brave, and what if we were that bold when things are going perfectly well with our clients, and they are super happy for us if we just paused and said, you know what, we have some new information, we have some new data, and we're going to stop, and we want to bring you something new and keep pushing forward. And I think we absolutely have to do that, because if we don't, somebody else is. The second thing is that they work the problem. And they don't admire it, they don't wallow in it, they don't get upset about it, they just work the problem. In my 5th round of chemo, I had a massive reaction to it. My body completely rejected it. They immediately pulled me out of the chair. They got me into a dermatologist. They got me into an allergist. By the end of the day, they had it fixed, and they had me back in the chair by 5. Nobody was defensive of why they had given it to me the way they gave it. Nobody was blaming. Nobody was pointing any fingers. They just worked the problem. And that's what I try to do now. I try to pull the team together, make sure that we just identify how are we going to fix this, and all of us together, we just move on. And it allows us to be so much quicker and so much more agile, and so much more responsive. The third is no egos and constant collaboration. I mean, it is amazing when you're at a place like Memorial Sloan Kettering and you're working with the absolute top doctors in the world. And my oncologist, my breast surgeon, and my reconstruction doctor are all heads of the department. And they don't always agree. But what they do is they listen to each other intently. And they look to each other for counsel. And they bounce things off each other. And it's never about one person being right. It's about all 3 of them coming together and making sure that they're listening to each other and that they have the information that they need to make the most educated decision that they can. And I honestly feel that that's the way we have to move forward with our agencies. We cannot have one department that knows everything and has the end-all, say-all of like what it is that we're going to do. We have to be more collaborative. I've seen it work in the most difficult situations, and it's really inspired me to change the way that we're working. I just have 2 more.
No, you're good.
The other is that nobody's perfect. These doctors sometimes don't always have the answer, and they're vulnerable, and they're okay with it. I had an issue that lasted for 6 months that we couldn't crack. And my doctor, who's the top oncologist and really, one of the top oncologists in the world, looked at me and she said, I don't know, we're stumped. And my husband even said to me, should we go get a second opinion? And I said, absolutely not. This is my team. This is my family. They know me. And the fact that they were able to admit to me that they're just not sure makes them trust me even more. And to me, that's what makes the best and strongest partnerships with our clients, is when we can all just sometimes admit, I don't know, let's work this out together. Let's just be honest with each other. Because when you show up under false pretenses on either side, always pretending that you know and that you're the expert, you'll never be able to live up to that, ever. The last is positive intent. Words matter. How you talk to people matter. How you show up matters. Every single time I walked in the door, the woman who checked you in knew me, the nurses knew me. They always told me that they liked my hair, even though I didn't really have any. They always would say, just the kindest, most amazing things about my attitude, even though that day I may have cried in their office. And it just made me realize, at a time when we're under so much pressure and we're all working harder than we ever have before, just take that moment to really tell somebody what a great job they're doing, that you recognize how hard they're working, that their idea was great even if it didn't get sold. It goes a long way, and it makes a huge difference. And then lastly, and I'll hand it over to Kiran to tell her story, is I actually learned something about my own organization. And I'm sure you have heard this talked about a lot in regards to importance, but it's family as a business model. And my company surrounded me with so much love and so much support that I am now, my number one priority moving forward is the health and happiness of my organization, because we're all just people, and everybody has their struggles, and everybody has the things in their life that they need to overcome. And I realized how incredibly fortunate I was sitting at MSK that I was a CEO who can leave the office whenever I need to, and that I do have the support of an organization. Not everybody is in that position. I watched women be nervous about literally having to sit for 4 hours in a chemo chair and know that they had to get back to work, because if they didn't get back to work, they were gonna lose their job. So I just, it has inspired me greatly to look around and make sure that I'm listening and understanding what is going on. Everybody's human. Everybody has something. and just letting people have success on their own terms, and acknowledging that nothing's really easy with anyone. So those are my big takeaways. We're going to open it up for questions at the end, but Kiran has a very different story because, like I said, all of our stories are different. So thank you.
Thank you guys for coming. I know this is the last session before we go back into the general session. And as we were talking about it, about getting ready for today, one of the things that we discussed is that, again, every person's journey is different. So my takeaways from it is in terms of not only how I found out about it and how I got through it, but also what enabled me to get through it. So when I had been in consulting, so services business forever, and at some point I was 32 and wanted to have a family, and there was no way with my husband and I both being in consulting we could. So I left, and about 5 minutes later we got pregnant. So there's a lesson learned in that in itself. You should be in the same place. It sometimes helps. And so when a couple of years later, my husband is one of two, I'm one of two, we're both type A personalities, and we wanted to have 2 kids. And so we had a plan. And so, of course, everything should go according to plan. And unlike the first time where I got pregnant in about 5 minutes, it was taking a while. And so you go through what many women do, which you don't know in your teens and 20s when you're trying not to get pregnant. And all of a sudden you're in your 30s and you are trying to get pregnant. It's not easy. Like, no one tells you about this. So I'm telling you, in case you want to know. And sometimes hard. And so we started going through a whole battery of tests that you go through. And at some point after one test and procedure, they found a polyp. And the doctors are all high-fiving each other because they found what was causing me not to be pregnant. And on July 2nd, so right before 4th of July weekend, I got a phone call from my doctor. I just assumed she was just checking in, and she told me that I had a sarcoma, adenosarcoma, which is uterine cancer. And for anyone who doesn't know, it's much, much, much more common for someone in their 50s and 60s, and not common at all for someone in their early 30s. And I didn't even know what the word meant. Like, there's just a big buzzing. And so that was on a Thursday. That Monday, I went to Dana-Farber in Boston. And I remember the day because it was this cold room. And it matters. It was gray and it was cold. And I'm sure she was a lovely doctor and very good. She basically told me I needed to have a hysterectomy immediately and freeze my eggs, and let's call it a day. And I said, no, like, I want another child. And she's like, listen, this is my advice, but I recommend that you go get a second opinion. And I recommend you go to Mass General to go get that second opinion. So, and very similar to what Kirsten's saying, like, the instincts you have and what gets you through your career, good bosses, good teammates, the chemistry you have, it happens in health as well. When you find your doctor and your team, it's magic. And so I show up. First of all, the hardest job in the entire world has to be the person who picks up the phone at an oncologist's office and has to, like, manage through all the emotions the person on the other side is feeling. And this oncologist said, listen, we're getting you an appointment with Dr. Fuller. And I said, okay. And she's like, no, he's the man. He's the one who writes the stuff on this. And he is the chief of oncology. He's the one you want. I said, okay. And he walked in when on my appointment a couple of days later, and I knew it was going to be okay. And that sounds silly, but I knew it was going to be okay. And you create this relationship with your doctor, the nurses, the whole team, and they are your support system. And they're a big part of it in terms of what helps you get through. Fast forward, I told Dr. Fuller I wanted to have another baby. He's like, great, I'll take care of the cancer, you take care of having another child, and we'll each play players in position. And that's still a mantra I live by almost every day, who are the players in position. So fast forward, I couldn't have, through a whole bunch of reasons, I couldn't carry a baby myself. So we ended up finding a gestational carrier, and 9 months later, our twins, Naya and Lily, were born. So we now have 3 girls, and they just turned 11 last month. The lessons I learned coming out from this were a couple of things. It's where you find your strength from. I presented with a woman a couple of months back, and she talked about that she had to go inside herself to find the strength, to find the ability to go through. And for me, it was the opposite. It was, I was fortunate enough to have an amazing husband. I have a phenomenal group of women friends who were just my players in position. The friend who, when he didn't want to talk about the cancer at all, she would show up with a bunch of People magazines and wine. The friend who was, when you needed a cheerleader, she was the one who was good. Like, they each had their role. And what I had to do was let them play their roles because they were going through a grieving process the same way I was. And I had to respect that. The other part that was really important to me were the people I worked with. This wasn't common, right? It wasn't, they didn't have precedent in terms of how do you deal with someone on the team who has cancer and how do you support them. And yet, I will tell you, I was at the time working at Shaw Supermarkets. I stayed for 10 years in that organization. And it wasn't just because I worked with great people. It's because when I needed them most, they stuck by me and they made it work. And they stepped up when I was going to be out for a little while and took it over and always let me know that I had a place to come back to. And I tried every day to pay it back tenfold. And that's a little bit of what we wanted to talk about today is like, as you're supporting people in your own organization, what they're going through, it means a lot to know that you're not trying to fix it for them, but you know that you're creating an environment for them to sometimes have an off day, sometimes be able to just break down and close the door and just like cry sometimes, because that's what happens. But it also, they're the ones that are supporting you and they're asking what they can do and help. That means so much. They're not trying to fix it, but they want, if you can create an environment for your peers and for the people on your team for that, it will pay back. So that's something I've tried to take. When my first day at Arnold, introducing myself to the team, a woman came up to me and told me she was right in the middle of breast cancer treatments. And she and I formed such a special relationship. I didn't try to pretend I knew exactly what she was going through, but she knew she had someone safe in me that she could talk to about like when you have a bad day, and I loved that relationship with her. It was an important one to me as well because you're always going through something like this where you've come out on the other side and you're stronger and better for it. You always want to pay it forward. And that's a lot of why we're doing even this today is if there's one part of our message, regardless of what part it is that resonates with someone here or that you share with someone, then we did our job today. So we could call it a day. But so that's my story.
One of the things that people always ask me is like, has it given you greater perspective? And I found that question very daunting early on because I would be like, oh, I'm supposed to have like, did this change me in a very personal way? Am I supposed to now like have some really grand message at, you know, and when everybody asks that, the first thing that they expect you to say is that I want to spend more time with my family. And so I would feel guilty sometimes because one of the things that actually made me feel the absolute best was walking into work and walking down that long hallway to my office and seeing everybody and having that kind of purpose of knowing that I had something really either challenging that I needed to do that day, something that was really going to get my mind off everything. And so I guess from a perspective standpoint, what I say now is that everything, just the things that matter really matter. My family really matters. Work really matters, but only those things that need to matter. The things that don't bother me anymore. If and I just let them, kind of roll off my back. Don't get defensive, don't get upset. It just is what it is. That particular thing doesn't really matter. If my, son doesn't get a A+ or even a B+ on a test, it doesn't really matter in the scheme of things. So, and I think that if you can do that and live that way, I know it's really hard. It can be really life-changing. There's that quote that love what you do and you'll never work a day in your life. I think we all know that is absolutely not true. I saw another version of that quote the other day that said, love what you do and it's, really effing hard and you have no boundaries and you'll take everything really personally. The truth is when we love what we do, it is really hard to separate yourself. I mean, that's why we do it, right? Because we love it. And so, yeah, I still love going to work, but I still also love being with my family. I've found a way now to just some of the small stuff. I don't sweat it as much, and I don't maybe take it as personally as I used to. And I don't think that you have to go through something like this to really try to live that way. And what I'm really trying to do right now is look at people in my organization and say, you know what, let's not worry about that one. Let's worry about this one, because that really matters.
Do we want to open up?
Yeah, so we thought if you want, we've got a little bit of time, and we could open it up for questions if anybody has them. Please don't be nervous. I know nobody ever likes to ask questions in a public forum. But look, there we go.
Oh, here we go.
Hi.
You can hear me.
They said they were going to have stuff for that, but.
Here it is.
I can't see a thing.
Hi.
Hi.
I just wanted to thank you.
Oh, well, thank you.
This topic just blew my mind. Last year, I beat cancer. I got the call at work. So it was very much, how do you deal with this at work?
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to share something I learned, which
great.
was it's okay to tell people.
Yeah.
It's okay to tell people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I ended up telling everyone in the whole agency.
Yeah.
And there was another woman who had thyroid cancer and had gone through everything I was going through.
Yeah.
So I instantly found support.
Yeah.
So just this idea that it's something to be ashamed of or to keep secret. You guys have helped me be brave. Like I just tweeted about this panel and said I'm a cancer survivor, and I have never done that before. So I want to honor and thank you for the openness and encourage anyone who's going through it to open up.
I think that's a really good message. I think talking about it more is one of the things that can help transform our industry, because as you know, our industry, like many, any sign of illness or any sign of, struggling with something in the past has been seen as a sign of weakness. And nobody ever wants to give anyone cause for concern or give our clients any cause for concern. It's a hard thing to go, you know what, this is okay to talk about. I didn't talk about it openly at first. But when I did start sharing with clients, it absolutely 100% changed our dynamic for the better. And they weren't scared, they were supportive. So you're right. But you have to do it on your own terms. You have to be comfortable with it. It's a very personal, private thing. And it's putting yourself out there also means sometimes that people are just gonna worry. And then that can put a burden on you too, because you don't want people around you to worry. So I think it really just 100% has to be on your own terms and what you feel comfortable with.
I think I'd also add to your point, it is exactly that, is whoever you are and where you need to get strength from, that has to come first, right? And in my case, it was needing to go to other people to gain from their strength, right, and their positivity. And I agree with you in terms of sometimes by sharing it with others, you are burdening them if you feel like you are. But for me, in my case, like my friends needed to do something. They needed to feel useful. They needed to feel like they were helping in some way. And so I had to remind myself of that as well. But what I find is people are remarkable when it comes to wanting to step up and help, especially in the workplace.
Yeah. I mean, it was coworkers that one held one hand and other held the other when I had to, shave my head. It was coworkers that texted me every single day, making sure that I was okay. So, look, when you do what we do, your work is your family and your family is your work, and it's all intertwined and it all so yeah, I think, but it has to be on your own terms, and who you share it with has to be on your own terms.
Hi, in the front here.
Okay, it's really bright. Okay, there you are. Hi.
Hi.
So mine Well, it's not as much of a question, just first of all, also thank you. I'm coming from a little bit of a different perspective. My mom was actually sick. Unfortunately, she didn't beat cancer. And what's interesting is that I also work at an Omnicom agency. So the first week that I started working there is when my mom passed away. So it was a very crazy time. But I'm on the HR team, and my team was incredible. But it was, interesting because when I came back, so I took like a few weeks off for everything. But when I came back, it was like, because I was new and I didn't really know anyone else in the organization, it's like, do you tell people? Like, what do you say? It's like, it was really strange for me because I'm like, this huge, I wasn't sick, but this huge thing just impacted my life, and I'm new here, and it's like the only thing that's really going on, and it was a very weird thing, and I didn't really tell anyone else because no one knew me, but my team was great and always checking in. I found that over time, I've been here for almost 3 years now, I'll chat with different people here and there, and I find that when I do share the story, it's like a release kind of, and you find this connection with people, and there's someone else in my organization that also went through the same kind of cancer my mom went through, and she's a survivor, so there's kind of that connection there. But then also what you were saying on another note, in regards to like work being your family and all that kind of stuff, and how your coworkers were holding your hands when you shaved your head. My mom actually was a social worker at Hackensack University Medical Center, which is a really big cancer center in New Jersey, and she worked in the oncology department. So it was kind of like full circle for her. So it was amazing for her because these people really were her family, because she'd been working with them for 20 years. So her her coworkers were her doctors and her nurses, and they were also her family. Obviously, I'm her family too, but it is something to be said. She had a different situation. She wasn't working in like necessarily a corporate environment, but it is so important that you have that, because she would go into work, but then she would also just get treatment at work because it's all in the same place, and it would just be like an everyday situation for her. And it's important that you feel that. I think this conversation is very, very important.
Oh, well, first of all, very sorry. But I'm so glad if in any way, kind of this talk and talking about opening up and how it is important that I think as leaders and in our organization, that we're always listening and watching and making sure that we're kind of reading the signals of our people, then hopefully this talk is worth it. So thank you.
Hi.
Hi, Laura.
How are you doing?
Good.
First off, I totally agree with Kirsten. Like, you got to do everything on your terms. But cancer survivor, 8 years ago, and I think one of the things that I had the hardest time dealing with was, that you feel like this is his weakness and this is a liability that your employers might hold against you. When I was going through cancer treatment, I was a freelancer and I didn't want to tell anybody because I'm like, oh my God, I'll never work again. This will be this liability. And I remember I took a fairly big job at BBH right after that, and I'm like, do I need to tell them that I've just gone, is this a liability? And I remember telling John Petroulis, the CCO, and he was like, yeah, no, we're cool. Like, everything's fine. And that was amazing. Like, just all of a sudden adding that level of normalcy to everything, which I know, especially when you're going through cancer treatment, you're just craving everything to be normal and boring, and which I think when you're talking about going back to work all the time, like that was, that's all you wanted to do was for everything to be boring and normal.
Right.
You had enough excitement in your life.
Yes.
But I would encourage, I think especially employers, if you've got people, and it could be a health crisis. There's a lot of different kind of crises and things that people live through. Eventually something will happen to all of us.
That's right.
But to also acknowledge the sort of, I think there's an extra little skill set that comes with that, when people have kind of rolled with the punches and gone through some stuff. So I think we need to kind of have these conversations as much as we can. And I know they're hard because they're very private conversations. But just to acknowledge that this isn't a weakness or a liability. This is actually probably something that made that person a little bit stronger.
Yeah.
It's different, right? With cancer, it's not a stigma. It's not like you did something per se to get it, right? That you put yourself in a dangerous situation and that's what happened, or I don't know. I think in this case, it's to your point, it's you want things to be normal, and when you're going through things aren't normal, and you don't want to be a burden on other people. You don't want to you want to just do your job, right? But sometimes it's hard to. And it depends on, it's such an individual case by case on how you deal with it, right? And how you talk about it, and if you talk about it and all this. And I think our job is to make sure that for those who do want to talk about it, that we create an environment that is safe and that is freeing and allowing them to go through what they're going through and know that they have a place that they can do that.
Yeah. I mean, at BBDO, my number one goal is to create an environment where everybody feels safe, respected, and can thrive. And I think by hopefully me talking about it, just continues to reinforce to everyone that, I have an open door. You can come and talk to me. If you don't want to talk to me, there are a lot of other people out there that you can talk to. But it is important that we make sure that everybody knows that if they're dealing with something, they don't have to hide it. They don't have to. And it's much easier when you're in a leadership role than an AE who's trying to prove themselves. I personally want them to know, and I know that Kiran does too, that you can tell us you're not going to be held back because you've dealt with a family crisis or you yourself are dealing with something. These are humans, these are people, and they all have incredible passion and drive, and they want to be there, but sometimes life just gets in the way and they shouldn't be punished for that. So we are on 0 in terms of time. Thank you very much. Thank you.